Commander Hannah stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, looking out at the stars. The view was usually beautiful, a vast ocean of light and peace. But today, the darkness was broken by flashes of green and red fire. The silence of space was filled with the sounds of alarms and shouting crew members. They were losing the war. The enemy was called the Xyloff Swarm. They were not like the other species in the galaxy. They did not want to trade. They did not want to talk. They only wanted to consume. The Xyloff were giant insects, hard shells, and sharp claws, and they traveled in ships that looked like hives made of black metal. They moved from star system to star system, eating everything and leaving only dust behind. Hannah looked at the main tactical screen. It showed hundreds of red dots. Each red dot was an enemy ship. Her blue dots were disappearing one by one. Her ship shook hard as another blast hit their shields. "Report," Hannah said, her voice calm but tired. She was a tall woman with gray hair, wearing the silver uniform of the Galactic Coalition. She had fought for peace her whole life. But peace was not winning today. "Shields are down to 20%, Commander," said a young officer at the back. "The Fifth Fleet is gone. The Xyloff are breaking through the line. If they get past us, the colony world behind us will have no defense." Hannah closed her eyes for a second. Millions of lives were on the other side of that line. Families, children, the elderly. If she failed here, they would all die. She looked at her general, a man named Leor who stood by her side. He looked pale. "We cannot hold them," Leor whispered. "Our weapons are not strong enough. They adapt too fast. We shoot lasers, and they grow reflective skin. We fire plasma, and they cool their hulls. It is hopeless." Hannah shook her head. "It is not hopeless until we are dead, but we cannot do this alone." She turned to the communications station. "Is the black box ready?" The communications officer looked nervous. "Yes, Commander. But are you sure? The stories about the Deathworlders, they are just myths, legends. If we send that signal, we might be inviting something worse than the Xyloff. What could be worse than total extinction?" Hannah asked sharply. "The legends say they come from a high-gravity world. A world where the weather tries to kill you, and the animals hunt you. They say the humans are violent. They say they are dangerous. But right now, I need dangerous. I need someone who is not afraid of the dark. Activate the black box protocol." Hannah ordered. "Send the signal to the coordinates of the Sol system. Send it on every frequency. Beg for help." The officer typed the command. A message shot out from the ship, moving faster than light. It traveled past the burning ships, past the debris of destroyed planets, and deep into the uncharted space of the galactic rim. It was a cry for help from the weak. For 3 days, the Vanguard and the remaining coalition ships fought a losing battle. They were behind asteroids. They made hit-and-run attacks. But the Xyloff swarm was endless. Hannah's crew was exhausted. They slept at their stations. They ate rations with shaking hands. Every time the alarm sounded, their hearts sank. On the bridge, the mood was funeral-like. General Leor sat with his head in his hands. "It was a fool's errand," he muttered. "No one is coming. We died today, Commander." "Do not give up yet," Hannah said, though her own hope was small. She stared at the long-range sensors. They were empty. No reinforcements. No allies. Just a cold void. Then the sensor officer gasped. "Commander, I am reading a distortion in space. It is massive." Hannah looked at the screen. "Is it the Xyloff? Are they bringing another hive ship?" "No," the officer said, his voice shaking. "The signature, it is wrong. It is not the usual jump drive. It looks like they are tearing a hole in space." The stars ahead of them seemed to twist. The fabric of reality bent and snapped. And from that tear, ships emerged. Hannah felt her breath catch in her throat. She had expected ships like hers, sleek, silver, elegant. She expected graceful curves and glowing engines. But these ships were monsters of steel. They were blocky, angular, and ugly. They were painted dark gray and black. They did not shine with clean energy. They vented steam and gas. They looked like industrial tools, machines built to dig into the earth and crush rocks. One ship was larger than the rest, a heavy beast covered in gun turrets and missile pods. "The signal," Leor whispered. standing up. It worked. It is the Deathworlders. It is Earth. Open a channel, Hannah said. She felt a mix of relief and fear. These were the humans, the species that lived on a planet called Earth, where the gravity was twice as heavy as most worlds, and the atmosphere was filled with disease. She had heard they were primitives, only recently learning to fly. The communication screen crackled to life. A face appeared. It was a human male. He looked older, with lines on his face and short, cropped hair. He was not wearing a fancy uniform like Hannah. He was wearing a black shirt with a collar. He looked tired, and he had a small cut on his chin. He looked at Hannah, then at the chaos of the battle behind her. "This is Captain Eric of a United Earthship Annihilator," the man said. His voice was deep and rough. It sounded like stones grinding together. "We received your scream. You guys are making a lot of noise." Hannah stood up straight. "This is Commander Hannah of the Galactic Coalition. We are under attack by the Xyloff swarm. We request immediate assistance. We are facing total annihilation." Captain Eric looked at someone off-screen. A woman's voice in the background said something about targets locked. Eric looked back at the screen. He didn't look scared. He didn't even look worried. He looked bored. "Yeah, we see the bugs," Eric said. "Nasty-looking things. We've dealt with pests before." "Captain," Hannah said, trying to sound professional, "the enemy is vast. Our energy weapons are not effective. We have been fighting for weeks. We do not know if you can—" Eric held up a hand to stop her. "Commander," saved the briefing. "We didn't come here for a tea party. We came here because you sent a distress call. And frankly, we were getting bored sitting around Earth." He leaned closer to the camera. His eyes were cold and hard. "Which ones are the targets? And does anyone mind if we make a mess?" Hannah blinked. "Make a mess? We just need them stopped." "Understood," Eric said. A small, dangerous smile appeared on his face. "Consider them stopped. Lieutenant Sarah, fire main battery. Let's show these aliens what human firepower looks like." On the screen behind Eric, the view of space changed. The ugly, blocky ships of the human fleet rotated. They didn't use the precise control beams of the Coalition. Instead, massive doors on the sides of the ships opened up. Hundreds of projectiles launched. They were not lasers. They were solid metal slugs, moving at incredible speeds. They were railgun shots. Hannah watched in horror and awe as the human shells slammed into the Xyloff ships. There were no shields that could stop them. The solid metal tore through the hulls like paper. Explosions rippled across the enemy fleet. The Annihilator moved forward, its engines roaring with blue fire. It flew straight into the center of the Xyloff formation, ignoring the enemy fire. Small bits of debris bounced off the human ship's thick armor. "That ship, it has no shields," General Lear said, shocked. "It is relying purely on armor plating. It is insane." "It is working," Hannah whispered. Captain Eric's voice came over the comms again. "This is fun, but I see more of them. We're going to get up close and personal. Commander Hannah, I suggest you pull your ships back. You don't want to get hit by the splash." "Splash?" Hannah asked. "You'll see," Eric said. The human ships began to launch missiles. Thousands of them. They streaked out like angry hornets. They didn't hit the enemy ships directly. They flew past them and then detonated. The space filled with bright, blinding light. Nuclear explosions. Hannah shielded her eyes. The Coalition never used nuclear weapons in space. They were too messy, too dangerous to the ecosystem. But the humans used them without hesitation. The shock waves shattered the Xyloff ships, turning the insectoid vessels into floating dust. When the light faded, the front line of the enemy was gone. Just gone. "The target area is clear," Captain Eric said, sounding satisfied. "But we are just getting started. My crew is hungry for a fight." Hannah sat back down in her chair. Her heart was pounding. She looked at the tactical screen. The red dots were pulling back. The Xyloff were confused. They had never faced an enemy that fought like this. They had never faced an enemy that seemed to enjoy the destruction. "Commander," Lear said, his voice trembling, "what have we done? We asked for help, and we summoned devils." "We summoned soldiers, Leor," Hannah corrected him, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. And right now, they're the only thing standing between us and death. She looked back at the screen where Captain Eric's face was. He was barking orders to his crew. Bring us about, Eric was saying. Target the largest carrier. Let's see if they can bleed. Hannah realized then that the war had changed. It was no longer about defense or strategy. It had become something else. The humans had arrived, and they were not polite guests. They were predators. And the Xyloth were no longer the only scary thing in the galaxy. Prepare our ships to support the humans, Hannah told her crew. But stay back. Keep your distance. If Captain Eric says he will make a mess, I believe him. The vanguard turned to follow the dark, blocky ships of Earth. The Annihilator led the way, plowing through the debris of the destroyed enemy, a dark beast on a leash that was already starting to fray. The war for survival had just turned very, very dangerous. The war room on the Coalition station was a place of quiet elegance. The floor was made of polished white stone, and the walls were curved softly, displaying holographic maps of the galaxy in soothing blue lights. The air smelled like flowers and clean air. But today, the room was filled with tension. The leaders of the 7 great races sat around a round table, looking worried. Standing in the center of the room was Lieutenant Sarah. She was a human female, dressed in a rugged, dark green uniform that looked out of place among the silk robes and shiny suits of the alien leaders. She had short brown hair tied back in a tight ponytail, and her face was stern. She stood with her feet apart, her hands clasped behind her back. To the aliens, she looked small and fragile. They knew humans came from a death world, a planet with high gravity and dangerous animals. But seeing her in person, she just looked soft. We must discuss the strategy for the defense of the mining colony, said High Counselor Vex. He was a tall, thin alien with blue skin and large eyes. Our ships will create a shield wall. We will use our focus beams to push them back. It is a civilized way to fight. Sarah sighed softly. She looked at the map floating in the air. It showed the mining colony, a rich resource planet full of workers and their families. The red dots of the Xyloth swarm were moving toward it. With all due respect, Counselor, Sarah said. Her voice was clear and loud, echoing in the quiet room. A shield wall will not work. The Xyloth do not care about your shields. They will ram their ships into you until your shields break. We have seen it before. We do not have the firepower to do otherwise, Vex argued. We cannot destroy the planet. It is a valuable source of fuel. We must be precise. Sarah shook her head. If you are precise, you will be dead. The Xyloth count on you being nice. They count on you following the rules of war. What do you suggest, human? Asked another leader, a female named Alara. She looked skeptical. Your Captain Eric destroyed an entire enemy fleet, but the radiation from his weapons will linger in that sector for 100 years. You left poison in the stars. Sarah looked her in the eye. And we save your ships. That poison is better than extinction. Look, the plan is simple. We call it Hammer Down. She touched the hologram. The human fleet will not hide behind shields. We will move in front of the planet. We will use kinetic bombardment. We will drop heavy rods of metal from space. We will launch nuclear missiles at their cluster points. Yes, it will leave craters. Yes, it will damage the landscape. But the Xyloth will be vaporized. The room gasped. Several leaders stood up. You want to bomb the surface? Vex cried. There are workers down there. There are cities. The Xyloth eat cities, Sarah said coldly. If we bomb the landing zones, we might lose a few buildings. If we let you try your shield wall, the Xyloth will land and eat everyone. Would you rather have a broken city or a graveyard? The leaders looked at each other. They were terrified of the human plan. It sounded brutal and savage. It sounded like something a monster would do. But they were more terrified of the Xyloth. Finally, Vex sat down, his head low. Do it, he whispered. But keep the damage as low as you can. We will do what is necessary, Sarah said. She turned and walked out of the room, her boots making a heavy clicking sound on the white floor. 2 days later, the Xyloth fleet arrived at the mining colony. The sky above the planet turned dark with the black shapes of the hive ships. The coalition ships formed their perfect lines, their blue shields shimmering like soap bubbles. But the Xyloth didn't fire at the ships. They launched thousands of drop pods straight down to the planet. "They are landing," shouted a coalition officer. "They are bypassing the fleet." "Squadron leaders, engage," ordered Major Tom over the human comms channel. Major Tom was a commander of a human fighter wing. He sat in the cockpit of a starfighter, a machine called the Raptor. It wasn't pretty like the alien ships. It was blocky and covered in weapons. He gripped the control stick and pushed the throttle forward. "Let's go, boys and girls." Tom yelled, "Don't let them hit the dirt." The human fighters didn't fly in smooth lines. They moved like angry hornets, diving and spinning. Tom targeted a cluster of enemy drop pods falling toward a civilian city. He squeezed the trigger. His ship didn't fire lasers. It fired rotary cannons. Bullets the size of a man's arm tore through the sky, shredding the Xyloth pods. The pods exploded in green fire, raining debris down on the wilderness instead of the city. "Too many of them," yelled a pilot named Lisa. "They are getting through." "Don't let up," Tom shouted. "If they land, those people are lunch. Punch it." Meanwhile, in space, the human capital ships were moving. The U.S. Annihilator and its sister ships ignored the small fighters. They aimed their huge railguns at the Xyloth motherships hanging in orbit. Captain Eric stood on his bridge. "Target the big one in the center, the one that looks like a pimple." "Firing," said the weapons officer. The ship shuddered as the massive railgun accelerated a metal slug to a fraction of the speed of light. The projectile was invisible as it traveled through the vacuum. It slammed into the Xyloth mothership. There was no explosion, just a massive impact. The slug tore straight through the ship, exiting the other side. The ship didn't blow up instantly. It crumpled, the metal buckled. The internal atmosphere vented, and the ship broke into two pieces. It silently fell apart, spilling thousands of Xyloth warriors into the cold void where they froze instantly. "Good hit," Eric said. "Next target." Down on the surface of the planet, the view was terrifying. The Xyloth had managed to land some pods despite the human fire. Giant insects, the size of trucks, were pouring out of craters. They had 6 legs, sharp mandibles, and shells that glistened in the sun. They ran toward the domed cities of the miners. The coalition ground forces were there. They carried energy rifles that shot blue beams. They fired at the monsters, but the beams just bounced off the hard shells. "Our weapons are useless," screamed a coalition soldier. "Fall back! Fall back!" The aliens ran in panic. They were not used to close combat. They were scientists and miners, not warriors. The Xyloth chased them, screeching, ready to feed. Suddenly, the sky roared. Loud, thumping sounds echoed over the battlefield. Heavy transport ships, painted gray with red crosses, descended rapidly. They didn't land gently. They smashed into ground, kicking up clouds of dust and rock. The back ramps of the ships lowered, and human soldiers ran out. They wore heavy powered armor, suits that made them look like walking tanks. Their helmets were dark, with glowing red visors. They carried massive rifles and shotguns. Sergeant Mike was the first one out. He held a shotgun in his hands. He looked at the horde of insects rushing toward the fleeing aliens. "Open fire." Mike roared. The sound of the human weapons was deafening. It wasn't the pew-pew of the alien guns. It was the booming thunder of gunpowder and high-explosive rounds. Mike fired his shotgun. The blast hit a Xyloth warrior in the face. The hard shell cracked, and green blood sprayed. The monster fell. Mike didn't stop. He pumped the gun and fired again. Get some. Get some. The human squad moved forward, walking slowly into the swarm. They did not run away. They did not panic. They stood their ground and poured fire into the enemy. The Xyloth were confused. These small creatures should have been easy to kill. But the humans wore armor that the insects couldn't bite through. And the humans hit back harder than anything else in the galaxy. Corporal David, a heavy gunner, set up his machine gun. He held the trigger down, and the barrel spun. A stream of large bullets chewed to the line of insects, cutting them down like wheat. "This is like shooting bugs in a barrel." David laughed over the comms. I haven't even broken a sweat. Commander Hannah watched the battle from the safety of her ship in orbit. She had a video feed from the surface. She saw the human soldiers standing in the fire, laughing as they killed. She saw the craters left by the orbital strikes. Craters where valuable mines used to be. The coalition leaders had been right to be afraid. The humans were saving them. Yes, the Xyloth were dying. The colony was safe. But the cost? The humans weren't just fighting a war. They were enjoying it. They fought with ferocity that belonged to a wild animal, not a civilized being. Major Tom's ship flew over the battlefield, dropping napalm bombs that created a wall of fire, burning the insect alive. It was horrific. It was effective. Captain Eric's voice came over the general channel. Commander Hannah, this is Eric. The landing zone is secure. We have pushed the bugs back. But the ground is messy. Lots of green slime and craters. Hannah looked at the destruction. A beautiful valley was now a burning wasteland. Understood, Captain, Hannah said softly. Thank you. Don't mention it, Eric replied. We're moving to the next sector. We heard they have a breeding ground there. We're going to go level it. Hannah turned off the screen. She looked at General Lior, who was pale and shaking. We are winning, Lior whispered. But I am not sure we're the good guys anymore. Hannah looked out the window at the dark, blocky ships floating in space. We are the good guys, Lior. We are just letting the wolves do our dirty work. But we must never forget, wolves eat meat, and one day they might get hungry again. The Xyloth swarm was smart. They were not just mindless animals. They learned quickly. After the battles at the mining colony, they changed their tactics. They stopped sending their big ships against the human railguns. Instead, they targeted a moon base controlled by the coalition. The moon had lower gravity than Earth, which made it a perfect place for a heavy fight. The moon base was called Outpost Theta. It was a small research station. When the Xyloth attacked, they landed thousands of soldiers on the surface. The coalition troops stationed there tried to fight. They used their energy rifles, but the Xyloth had evolved. They now had reflective scales on their armor. The blue laser beams hit the scales and bounced off, doing no damage. We cannot stop them, cried a coalition officer over the radio. They are at the main door, requesting immediate evacuation. We are abandoning the base. Commander Hannah listened to the distress call from the bridge of the Vanguard. She felt helpless. Send our fast attack ships to pick them up, she ordered. It will take too long, General Lior said sadly. The Xyloth are already inside. Then, a new voice cut into the communication channel. It was calm and sounded slightly bored. This is Sergeant Mike of the Human Drop Troopers. We are in the area. Do you want us to go down there and clean up your mess? Hannah perked up. Yes, Sergeant, but be careful. The enemy has reflected armor. Energy weapons are useless. Energy weapons? Mike laughed. It was a rough sound. Don't worry, Commander. We brought something else. We brought hammers. Inside the human transport ship, the atmosphere was loud and hot. The ship shook violently as it descended toward the moon's surface. There were no seats for the human soldiers. They hung from the ceiling by strong straps, wearing their heavy, bulky armor. The armor was painted gray and scratched. It looked thick and clumsy compared to the sleek suits of the coalition. Sergeant Mike checked his shotgun. He clicked the safety off. He looked at the soldiers hanging around him. All right, listen up. Gravity is low down there, so keep your mag boots locked. If you jump too high, you become a floating target for the bugs. We drop in 30 seconds. Let's go kill something. The back of the ship opened up. There was no ramp, just open air. The ship was still moving fast. Go, 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 Mike shouted. The soldiers let go of their straps. They didn't use parachutes. Their armor was too heavy for that. They simply fell. They plummeted toward the ground like stones. It was a terrifying sight to anyone watching, but the humans loved it. They hit the ground of the moon with loud thuds. The lunar dust exploded into white clouds around them. The impact was hard enough to crush a normal being, but the humans stood up instantly. Their magnetic boots locked onto the metal floor of the outpost. Check your corners, Mike yelled, pumping his shotgun. They were outside the main airlock of the base. The door had been torn open. Green blood was smeared on the walls. Inside, they could hear the screeching of the Xyloff. "Move up," Mike ordered. The squad entered the base. The corridors were narrow and dimly lit. This was bad for long-range rifles. So the humans switched to shotguns and submachine guns. They moved as a tight unit, their heavy boots clanking on the metal floor. Suddenly, a Xyloff warrior jumped out from a side vent. It was huge, filling the corridor. It hissed and lunged at Mike, its claws ready to slice through metal. Mike didn't even flinch. He pointed his shotgun at the creature's face and pulled the trigger. Boom! The shotgun blast was a solid wall of lead. At this close range, the reflective armor didn't matter. The force of the blast blew the Xyloff's head clean off. The body slumped to the floor. "Too easy," Mike said. "Keep moving." They fought their way through the base. It was brutal. The Xyloff were strong, but the humans were stronger in their armor. When a Xyloff tried to bite a human soldier, the soldier would simply punch the creature with a metal glove fist, crushing its skull. The humans fought in tight spaces, using their knives and the butts of their guns as weapons. It was a violent, bloody mess. Corporal David was carrying a large machine gun. He reached a large hallway where dozens of Xyloff were charging. "Contact front," David shouted. He held the trigger down. The gun spun, spitting bullets at a terrifying rate. The corridor filled with noise and smoke. The Xyloff tried to rush him, but they were cut down. The walls were ripped apart by the bullets. The aliens fell in piles, green blood pooling on the floor. "I'm out of ammo," David yelled. "Reloading." "Cover him," shouted another soldier named Lisa. She stepped forward and threw a grenade. It bounced off the ceiling and landed behind the enemy line. Boom! Shrapnel flew everywhere, slicing to the soft underbellies of the insects. While the physical fighting was intense, something else was happening. The Xyloff were a hive mind. They could connect their minds together to create a psychic wave. They used this to scare their enemies. As the humans pushed deeper into the base, the Xyloff unleashed a fierce scream. It was a psychic attack. It didn't make a sound, but it hit the mind directly. On the upper levels of the moon base, a few surviving coalition soldiers were hiding. They were terrified. When the psychic scream hit them, they panicked. They screamed and dropped their weapons. Some of them curled into balls, crying. The fear was overwhelming. It felt like death itself was touching them. But the humans didn't stop. Mike paused for a second as the wave hit him. He felt a chill, a sudden feeling of dread. It made his heart beat faster. But then his training and his biology took over. Humans came from a planet filled with predators. They were used to fear. They ate fear for breakfast. "Is that all you got?" Mike yelled at the ceiling. "Is that supposed to scare us?" He laughed. It was a loud, manic laugh. "I'm from Earth. We have tornadoes and sharks and taxes. You think a little headache is going to stop us?" "Kill them all," shouted Corporal David, firing his machine gun again. The psychic attack that froze the coalition troops only made the humans angry. It was like poking a sleeping bear with a stick. The humans roared and charged forward. They fought harder, faster. They stopped being careful and started being brutal. They tore through the Xyloff lines like a hot knife through butter. Commander Hannah watched the video feed from the human helmet cameras. She saw the narrow corridors covered in green slime. She saw the humans laughing and joking while they killed monsters that made her own people faint with fear. "General," Hannah said softly, "look at the readouts. Their heart rates, their adrenaline." Leor looked at the medical data streaming from the human suits. "Their heart rate is high, very high, but they are not in shock. They are excited. It is like they're enjoying the danger." "The psychic scream usually breaks a soldier's mind in seconds," Hannah said. "These humans, their brains are too chaotic. The Xyloff cannot control them. The noise in their heads, the aggression, it acts like a shield." The fight on the moon base ended quickly. The Xyloff, unable to scare the humans and unable to hurt their thick armor, were slaughtered. The human squad reached the central control room. Sergeant Mike walked in, stepping over the bodies of the dead insects. He activated his radio. "Commander Hannah, this is Mike. Outpost data is secure. The bugs are dead. We found some of your guys hiding in the storage room. They're pretty shaken up, but they're alive. Thank you, Sergeant, Hannah said. Excellent work. Just doing our job, Mike said. He looked around the ruined room. But tell your engineers to fix the gravity. I miss feeling heavy. Also, we need more ammo. We used a lot. We will send supplies immediately, Hannah promised. As the communication ended, Mike looked at his squad. They were leaning against the walls, smoking cigarettes and drinking water from their canteens. They were covered in dirt and alien blood, but they were smiling. Good job, everyone, Mike said. Let's go home. I need a steak. Corporal David kicked a dead Xyloff out his way. Hey, Sarge, you think the aliens will ever stop underestimating us? Mike grinned behind his helmet. I hope not. It makes it easier to win. Back on the Vanguard, Hannah turned off the screen. She felt a strange mix of gratitude and terror. The humans had saved the day again. But as she looked at the empty corridors of her ship, she realized something important. The Coalition fought to survive. The humans fought because they were good at it. And on a death world, being good at killing was the only way to stay alive. The war had turned into a slaughter, and the humans were the butchers. But for now, they were her butchers. The war against the Xyloff swarm had reached a critical point. The humans had been fighting for 2 months, and in that time, they had pushed the enemy back further than the Coalition had managed in years. But with victory came a strange and heavy silence among the Coalition leaders. They watched the battlefields not with cheers, but with wide eyes and pale faces. The humans were effective, yes, but their way of war was frightening. It happened during a large space battle near a star system called the Veil. The Xyloff fleet was cornered. Their ships were damaged, and their main weapons were offline. They were trapped against a massive gas giant. There was no escape. According to the laws of the Galactic Coalition, when an enemy was defeated and helpless, you offered them a chance to surrender. It was the civilized thing to do. It was what separated the Coalition from monsters. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Commander Hannah watched the tactical map. The red dots of the Xyloff ships were blinking, signaling distress. They are powering down their engines, General Leo reported, his voice full of hope. Look, Commander, they are sending a communication signal. They want to surrender. We have won. Hannah let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Open a channel. Let us discuss the terms. She stood up to address the screen. This was a moment of triumph. The Coalition had defeated the unbeatable swarm without destroying them all. Suddenly, the main screen flickered. The incoming transmission was interrupted. The face of a Xyloff leader, a terrified insectoid creature, vanished. In its place appeared the gruff face of Captain Eric. Commander Hannah, Eric said. He didn't say hello. He didn't smile. Captain Eric. Hannah said, surprised. We are handling this. The enemy is surrendering. Stand down your weapons. Eric looked at her with a flat, cold expression. Surrender? There's no such thing with these things, Hannah. I told you before. You don't let a venomous snake live just because it stopped biting for a second. You crush the head. Captain, this is an order. Hannah shouted, her voice rising. They are helpless. We will take them as prisoners of war. It is the law. We are not police officers, Hannah. We are soldiers, Eric said calmly. He turned his head slightly. Lieutenant Sarah, is the solution ready? Solution is ready, Captain. Sarah's voice came over the speaker. She sounded like she was discussing lunch, not mass murder. Target locked. The gas giant will ignite. What are you doing? Hannah whispered. She ran to the window of her ship. She could see the human fleet. They weren't moving to block the enemy. They were aiming their largest weapons at the gas giant behind the Xyloff ships. Captain, stop! Hannah screamed into the comms. This is a war crime. No, Eric said. This is pest control. Fire. The human ships fired, but they didn't fire at the Xyloff ships. They fired at the gas giant. They used specialized missiles designed to ignite the atmosphere. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the gas giant caught fire. A massive wave of heat and flame exploded from the planet's surface. It rushed outward like a tsunami of fire. It engulfed the Xyloff fleet. The enemy ships didn't even have time to power their shields back up. They were vaporized instantly. Thousands of ships, millions of warriors, gone in the blink of an eye. The silence on the bridge of the Asterisk. Vanguard was absolute. General Leor fell into his chair, his face white as a sheet. The crew stared at the screen in horror. The humans had just destroyed an entire fleet that was trying to surrender. Captain Eric's face appeared on the screen again. He looked satisfied. Threat neutralized. The sector is clean. We are moving to the next coordinate. Hannah was shaking with anger. How dare you? We had them. They were surrendering. Eric leaned closer to the camera. Commander, listen to me. You are soft. You think everyone thinks like you. They don't. That surrender signal? It was a trap. They were going to overload their cores and take half your fleet with them. We scammed them. We knew. Hannah stopped. You knew? How? Because we know dirty tricks, Eric said. We invented them. Now, are we going to fight the bugs, or are you going to lecture me? The screen went black. Hannah stood there for a long time. The victory felt like ash in her mouth. But deep down, she knew he might be right. She didn't trust the Xylof either. But the humans didn't even give them a chance. They just executed them. After the battle, the relationship between the Coalition and the humans changed. The Coalition ships stopped flying close to the human ships. They kept their distance. The mood in the war rooms became tense. On the human ships, however, the mood was different. They were bored again. The war was too easy for them. The Xylof couldn't match their speed or their violence. Lieutenant Sarah was in the engine room of a US Annihilator. She was holding a strange-looking device. It was a plasma coil from a Coalition ship, but she had taken it apart. She was welding it to a human missile casing. "What are you doing, Lieutenant?" asked a young Coalition engineer who was visiting for a joint repair mission. He looked at the weapon with fear. That safety lock is there for a reason. If you bypass it, the missile becomes unstable. It could blow up in the launch tube. "It won't blow up," Sarah said, her face covered in grease. She didn't look up. "It will just fly faster and hit harder. Your engines are too gentle. We need more punch." "The regulations say you cannot modify standard equipment without approval," the engineer stammered. Sarah wiped her hands on a rag and looked at him. Her eyes were intense. "Regulations are for peacetime. We are at war. I need this missile to punch through a Xylof Hive ship in one shot. If I follow your regulations, the missile bounces off. If I do this, the enemy dies. Which one do you prefer?" The engineer took a step back. I prefer to follow the rules." "Then go back to your nice, safe ship," Sarah said dismissively. "Leave the work to the pros." She turned back to her welding. The humans were starting to treat Coalition technology like toys. They were making things more dangerous, more volatile, and more deadly. They were ignoring safety protocols because they didn't care if they got hurt as long as they hurt the enemy more. Later that day, Commander Hannah requested a private meeting with Captain Eric. They met in a neutral docking bay between their two ships. Eric walked in, wearing his black combat suit. He looked rough and tired. Hannah wore her dress uniform, trying to maintain dignity. "We need to talk about your tactics, Captain," Hannah said, getting straight to the point. "The destruction of the surrendering fleet, it caused a panic in the Council. They are afraid of you. They are afraid you will turn on us next." Eric laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Turn on you? Lady, we are saving your lives. You should be giving us medals, not complaining." "There's a line, Captain," Hannah said firmly. "War has rules. When you cross the line, you become the monster." Eric walked up to her. He was taller than her and much broader. He looked down at her with a serious expression. "Commander, where I come from, there are no rules in a dark alley. If a mugger attacks you, you don't fight fair. You kick him in the knee. You poke him in the eye. You do whatever you have to do to go home to your family. That is all this is. The galaxy is a dark alley. We are just the ones willing to kick the knee. But at what cost?" Hannah asked. "I look at your soldiers. They don't act like soldiers. They act like they enjoy the killing. They laugh when they destroy things. That is not normal. Normal is relative." Eric said, "My people, we have a lot of rage. We come from a world that tries to kill us every day. We are aggressive. We are violent. But we control it. We point at the bad guys. You should be glad we are on your side. Because if we weren't..." He trailed off, leaving the threat hanging in the air. Hannah looked at him. She realized she couldn't control him. She couldn't control the humans. They were an unstoppable force of nature. She had unleashed a storm to blow away the smoke. But now the storm was starting to tear the roof off the house. "Just try to minimize the damage," Hannah said weakly. "Please." Eric nodded once. "We will do what is necessary. That is a promise." He turned and walked back toward his ship. As the airlock closed, Hannah felt a shiver go down her spine. The war was turning dangerous, not because of the aliens, but because of the saviors. The humans were winning. But Hannah began to wonder what would happen when the war was over. What would the wolves do when there were no more sheep to protect? Who would they hunt then? She looked out the window at the human ship. It looked dark and menacing against the stars. The Annihilator. It was a fitting name. They were not just fighting the enemy. They were annihilating the very idea of civilized warfare. And Hannah feared that once you invited the devil into your home, it was very hard to get him to leave. The final battle of the war took place on a planet that had no name. It was a desolate rock, far from the stars of the Coalition. The sky was choked with gray ash, and the ground was covered in sharp black rocks. It rained constantly, a cold, acidic rain that sizzled when it hit the ground. This was the hidden home of the Xyloth Queen. If she died, the swarm would fall apart. The human fleet dropped from the sky like hammers. They did not use the gentle landing protocols of the Coalition. They crashed their drop pods into the hard earth, shaking the ground for miles. The pods opened, and the humans marched out. Sergeant Mike was the first one on the ground. He wore the heavy, powered armor that made him look like a walking robot. He checked his shotgun. The air smelled like sulfur and rotten eggs. "Welcome to hell," Mike said over the comms channel. "It smells just like home." "Cut the chat." Captain Eric's voice came through clearly. "We have a job to do. The Queen is in that cavern ahead. Intelligence says she is guarded by 10,000 elite warriors. They will not stop. Neither do we." "Roger that," Mike replied. He looked at his squad. Corporal David was there, spinning his heavy machine gun barrel. Lisa was checking her grenades. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors, but Mike could feel their energy. They were ready. They had been fighting for months, and this was the final prize. "Move out," Mike ordered. They walked toward the black cavern. The entrance was huge, like the mouth of a giant beast. As they got closer, the ground shook. Thousands of Xyloth warriors poured out. They were bigger than the others, with shiny black shells and glowing red eyes. They screeched a war cry that hurt the ears. "Fire at will," Mike shouted. The sound of battle was deafening. The human squad didn't run away. They stood their ground in the rain. Corporal David's machine gun tore through the front line of aliens, sending green blood flying into the air. The aliens charged, running over their own dead to get to humans. Mike pumped his shotgun and fired. Asterisk boom. 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 Asterisk each shot killed a monster. But there were too many of them. A large Xyloth, twice the size of a man, jumped over the pile of bodies and landed right in front of Mike. It slashed at him with its claws. The claws hit Mike's armor and sparked, but the metal held. Mike didn't even step back. He slammed the butt of his gun into the creature's face, crushing it. "Not today, ugly." Suddenly, the air was filled with a loud buzzing sound. The Xyloth were flying. Bat-like creatures dove from the sky, grabbing at the human soldiers. "Air support. Where's the air support?" Lisa screamed over the noise. Above them, the sky roared. Major Tom's fighter squadron screamed overhead. They dropped napalm bombs. The ground erupted in walls of fire. The flying aliens burned and fell, their wings turning to ash. The fire washed over the human squad, but their shields protected them. "Thanks, Tom." Mike yelled, "Don't mention it." Tom's voice crackled. "Keep pushing. We see the Queen." Inside the cavern, it was dark and hot. The humans turned on their helmet lights. Beams of white light cut through the darkness. They walked deeper, stepping over piles of bones. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. In the center of the room sat the Xyloth Queen. She was enormous, the size of a building. She was attached to the floor by thick tubes. She had many eyes and a mouth full of dripping venom. She looked at the humans and let out a psychic scream. It was a scream of pure hate. It hit the humans' minds, trying to break their will. Sergeant Mike felt a sharp pain in his head. He saw visions of his own death, of Earth burning, of everything he loved being destroyed. It was a terrible feeling. For a second, he wanted to drop his gun and give up, but then he thought about the people he was protecting. He thought about the alien families he had saved. He thought about his squad. The anger rose up inside him, pushing the fear away. Humans were strange creatures. When they were afraid, they could freeze or they could fight. Mike was a fighter. Is that the best you can do? Mike yelled at the giant monster. I've had headaches scarier than you. He raised his weapon. David, Lisa, aim for the tubes. Cut her off. The squad opened fire. Bullets and grenades slammed into the Queen. She roared in pain and tried to swipe at them with her massive claws. The humans dodged, diving behind rocks. Mike saw a chance. The Queen was distracted by David's machine gun. Mike took a satchel charge, a bag of high explosives, from his belt. He set the timer for 10 seconds. Hey, over here, Mike shouted. He stepped out from cover and waved his arms. The Queen turned her giant head toward him. She opened her mouth to shoot a stream of acid. Mike threw the satchel charge. It flew through the air in a perfect arc and landed right inside the Queen's mouth. She swallowed it by accident. Mike hit the ground and covered his head. Fire in the hole. Boom. The explosion was muffled but powerful. The Queen's head swelled up and then burst. Green slime coated the walls of the cavern. The massive body shuddered and then collapsed. The psychic scream stopped instantly. The connection to the hive mind was gone. Outside, the thousands of Xyloth warriors froze. They fell to the ground, lifeless. The war was over. It took a week for the humans to pack their ships. There were no parades, no parties. The coalition was too scared of the humans to celebrate. The humans had won the war, but they had done it in such a violent way that the galaxy was shocked. On the last day, Commander Hannah went to the space dock to say goodbye. The human ships were repaired and fueled up. They looked dark and dangerous against the bright, clean background of the Coalition station. Captain Eric stood on the ramp of his ship, the UES Annihilator. Hannah walked up to him. She didn't know what to say. You are leaving? Hannah asked. Eric nodded. Our job is done. The bugs are dead. You're safe. Will we see you again? Hannah asked. She wasn't sure she wanted to see him again. Eric looked at her. Maybe, if you need help again. Or if we get bored. He smiled a little, but it wasn't a nice smile. You have our frequency, but I hope you don't have to use it. We prefer peace, believe it or not. We are good at war, but we like our quiet lives. Thank you, Hannah said, for saving us. We didn't save you for free, Eric said. We saved you because you asked and because we hate bullies. He looked out at the stars. Take care of yourselves, Hannah. Don't let the galaxy get too soft. If you get too soft, something else will come along and eat you. I will remember that, Hannah said. Eric saluted. It was a sharp military salute. Hannah saluted back. Then Eric turned and walked into his ship. The ramp closed. The engines roared to life. One by one, the human ships lifted off. They moved to the edge of the solar system and then tore holes in space, jumping into hyperspace. They were gone. Hannah stood on the dock for a long time, watching the empty space where they had been. General Lear walked up to stand beside her. It is quiet now, Lear said. Too quiet. They are gone, Hannah said. Do you think they will come back? Lear asked. I don't know, Hannah replied. Part of me hopes they stay far away. We are not like them. We are builders, not destroyers. But we are alive because of them, Lear said. Because of the monsters. Hannah looked at the stars. The galaxy felt bigger now. It felt darker. They knew now that there were things in the dark places of the universe. things that lived on high-gravity worlds and breathed poison. They knew that humanity was out there, watching, waiting. The war had turned dangerous. It had shown the coalition that they were weak. It had shown them that survival sometimes required making a deal with the devil. The humans were gone, but the memory of them would never leave. The galaxy had been saved, but it had lost its innocence. It was a dangerous place, and now everyone knew exactly what lurked in the shadows. The stars twinkled, cold and distant. Hannah turned around and walked back to her office. She had a lot of reports to write. She had to explain to the council that the wolves had returned to the forest. But she knew, and they knew, that the forest was no longer safe. The balance of power had changed. The age of soft civilizations was over. The age of the Deathworlders had begun.